Okay, let's start.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with us all over the world. This is Almudena Carracedo.
And I'm Robert Behar, and we are coming to you from Madrid, Spain tonight, and we're thrilled to be hosting a conversation about the beautiful film Eddy's World that you just saw. As you may know, this film premiered on December 14th through The New Yorker, and it is really touching people and having an amazing life. As of today, there's more than 690,000 views on YouTube, almost 130,000 on GQ in Taiwan, 40,000 on NewYorker.com. And so more than 800,000 people have seen this film, and there's word of mouth, and there'll be 1 million people who've seen it before we know it.
And since we are coming to you from Spain, we'll mention that at least 100 of Eddie's toys were distributed in Europe. He has attended a lot of toys shows here, won important awards in London Toy Fair, and has made people around Europe and around the world smile and come together with their families, with our families.
So without further ado, we'd first like to introduce the director of this film, Lynn Goldfarb, who is an Academy Award nominee, an Emmy and Peabody winner, and who's also has been our friend for actually close to 20 years. We're also thrilled to introduce Daniel Zimbaldi, who is one of the film's producers and who we're thrilled to have in the conversation here tonight.
And finally, it is our great pleasure to introduce the star of Eddie's World, Eddy Goldfarb, who's going to show up in any second now, I'm sure. Okay, why don't we start the Q&A while Eddy kind of joins in? I know he's there because we saw him before.
So we're going to start, Lynn, asking you a question I think all documentary filmmakers have, which is that so often we travel 10,000 miles away and we fight for access to find our subjects. And you've done that on many of your films. And so tell us the story. What inspired you to sort of look inwards and decide to make a film this time about your father?
Just 1 second, because Eddy joined us. Hi, Eddy.
Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you.
Great. So Lynn.
Yes. For me, I had been making, films about people that I considered extraordinary people who have helped change our world in one way or another. And as you said, I was always looking outward. And then a couple of years ago, I started thinking that maybe I should do a family legacy project with my father, because by that time he was in his mid-90s. And as I started interviewing him, I realized, oh my God, he is a great story. And I kind of felt bad that up to this point, I actually had never thought about making a film about my father. But I realized that particularly at this age, at where he is now, that his story is a story both about toys and creativity and ideas, but it's also a story about aging gracefully and actively and inspirationally. And so, so that was really what inspired me. And, it's been a wonderful journey.
That's beautiful. Eddy, now I'm going to you. People are falling in love with you and with your story, the toys that you invented and that we all grew up with. There is actually a moment in the film when you said that inventors needed to specialize and that you chose toys. Now, if you look inside yourself from that moment when you were on the submarine and you had to specialize, why did you choose toys?
Because I had no money. That was the big reason. I wanted to choose something that I could get right into, and it worked out fine. I was able to handle making toy prototypes, and it worked out.
That's great. You said that the toy industry, the toy industry is a noble industry. Why do you think that?
I believe that the noblest of all industries are teachers. Number one. And I think toys is a way that children learn, just like books and games. But games are part of the toy industry, and toys, of course, are part of it. Uh, so I felt that it was a very important industry, and as I got into it further and further, I realized it really was important that a good game or a good toy could sell thousands, millions, and that means a lot of families, a lot of children
That's beautiful.
can be affected.
Well, Daniel, we'd like to ask you how you got involved in the project. And then we want to talk a little bit about the visuals of the project, because this is a project that just has a very sort of beautiful look. There's a lot of it that's just so thought out and precise, and the colors. So maybe take us through you joining the project, and then also some of the collaboration with Scott B., the cinematographer, and of course with Lynn, and just help us understand the creative process behind this.
Well, I had made a similar kind of project about 30 years ago with a great aunt of mine who immigrated to the United States in the early 1900s from Italy. And so when Lynn said she wanted to get a record of her family history, I was totally all in and wanted to do that. And once we started doing it, of course, we got more excited by the fact that what Eddie was telling us in the interviews. And I kind of grew up post World War II on popular science and home inventors and build your own radio, the same kinds of things he's talking about, taking apart his father's radio and other kinds of things. And so I was completely enthralled with it. And then we thought, well, okay, if we're going to expand this, both Lynn and I had collaborated with Scott previously. She had helped work with him on a project he was producing, and he and I have collaborated on production of activities. And so when he was willing to join us, we wanted to create a kind of macro look, in the sense that we didn't want to disguise that Eddie was like working in a domestic setting. We wanted to feature that, but we really wanted to create some sort of visual isolation so you could get involved in what he was doing, and you wouldn't be like paying that much attention to the kitchen, or you wouldn't be paying that much attention to this or that, but you would be involved with his thought process, what he was saying. So we selected things like, very fast prime lenses, and worked in a relatively data-intensive codec so that we could manipulate the post-production of it and get that rich look, and still remain true to the domestic setting that he's working in. And so Scott was really gifted at that, and he brought some really unique tools to the party as well to keep the camera moving slowly. Had this little, and so all of that, I think, draws people in. And then we were particularly fortunate to have a really talented colorist in post who got it all and just even brought more out of it. So Dan Edwards, our colorist, was like beyond the Call of Duty. He was fantastic. So all of that, when you see it in the end, you get that it's like looking at candy, like looking at toys, right? It has all of the same characteristics. So we were thrilled. Yeah.
And as viewers, I think the film is so well crafted, and I think it meshes what you said about it being like toys. There's something that's so perfect, and the colors, there's really beautiful artistic vision, artistic craft. Eddie, we want to ask you a question about creative process, because so many of the people watching this are filmmakers or creators. And when we watch you at work, we want to understand your creative process. So where do your ideas come from? And how do you take an idea from just that spark all the way to reality so people can have it in their living room and play with it?
Actually, I really don't know where they come from. I can read something, I could see something, you could say something, and that could start a thought that turns into the beginning of an item. And I'm able to visualize them uh, very nicely and even plan out how I'm going to build the first prototype or something before I go to the board, drawing board. So I'm very fortunate I can visualize three-dimensionally. So that helps a lot. You know, it's something like someone who loves music and is turned on when they hear the music. You know, I'm turned on by a new thought, by a new idea.
That's so great. As filmmakers, it would be great to be able to visualize the film, the finished film when we start, because it's always a very long process, as you may have been able to see now. But Lynn, we had I had this kind of, you know, as filmmakers, we also make films about other causes, right? So tell me, and I've always thought, like, what would it be to make a personal film, right? So tell us, what was the experience of making a doc film with your father? Was it more challenging, or did it change your relationship? Did it enable to see your father in a different way? Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I think probably the key thing is it really allowed me to see my father differently. I was allowed to exist, to kind of peek into his world that we don't see as family or as children. Like we never would, you know, we'd never come over and have my dad like working in his shop. He would have done that, you know, before or after. We would have never followed him around, you know, on the process of what he does and how he does it. So that was a real privilege. And, you know, and also even just being able to be in his writing class and his movie group and just observing, which is what we do as filmmakers. But when, you know, when I'm doing it with my father, I get to see him very, you know, differently. Of course, one of the challenges was that my dad is always busy. He's always working on something, whether it's in the shop, a new idea, whether it's writing 100-word stories or whether it's working on his 3D printer. So trying to get him to say, yes, you can come over, you know, and work with us was a little bit hard, but probably on one of our most successful days in the shop, we said, we won't say a word to you. We'll just follow you around and you can just do what you're doing. And actually, I think that, you know, was a really smart way of filming.
That's great.
Well, we kind of want to turn that question around for you, Eddie. For Lynn, this was sort of this experience to see you at work and peek into your professional life and world. But for you, you were also participating in Lynn's filmmaking and seeing that creative process go forward, as opposed to her, you know, traveling around and doing filmmaking far away from you. So what was it like to be part of her creative process?
It was very interesting. I was very impressed, and I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen with all of this. And she put it together, and I thought it was very nice. I'm very proud of her. All my kids, my other daughter, and Martin, my son, of course, who works with me, or I work for him now, or something. But it's really a big help to me.
That's great.
It's fantastic. It's amazing, sort of the familial connections and these creative processes. But we have many more questions, but there are some great questions coming in from people who are watching right now. So Evangeline Griego, Vanji, is watching.
Who's our friend
who's
too.
our friend and your friend.
Yeah.
And she asked, what was it like growing up with a father who made toys? Were you part of a focus group? How did that experience
Yeah.
happen in your home?
Well, I think we were informally part of a focus group. I mean, my dad used to bring home toys for us to play with or try out. But he also he had a shop that he went to every day. So he went, so most of the work didn't happen at home. And so we would try things out. He'd come up with a new idea. He was very playful, as you can imagine. And we were always creating new things or new ideas, whether toys or other things. And so it was a very rewarding and kind of inspiring environment. But as I've said, also a couple of times, he had a locked room in our house where all of the drawings and the, what he was working on, in progress, it was always locked away, and we were sworn to secrecy. We were never allowed to talk about any toys that he was working on because, that was his livelihood, and he didn't want us to accidentally say something to someone.
We understand with the success of some of the toys that
Right.
secretism probably was the exact choice.
And did you stay secret, really? You never told anyone?
We never told anyone no. It was like, you never, right. But I think because of the kind of work that my dad did and that my parents, were involved in, our house was always a very welcoming place. We always had friends over, we always gathered, my dad would always help us with these elaborate projects for school that, were, that he was able to really, pull off, kind of, he had the creativity and the vision to do that. I will actually add something. When we were working on the series on the Roman Empire in the first century, of course, it's many years ago, but many years after my childhood, I was trying to create the feeling of being in the, when Mount Vesuvius exploded, being in the volcano. And I went to my dad to help, like, how to create that motion, how to make a device that would help us do it. And we used it in the film.
That's so great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Really great story. Eddy, you seem to be a very optimistic person. I think there's a quote from you that says, "I annoy people with my optimism," and I think I'm right. So coming from a half optimist, half pessimist as me, can you please help me? How has optimism helped you live a long and productive life?
And I think I was very optimistic about things. When things were hard at home, I knew things were going to be better. During the war, it really helped me a lot. I saw a lot of action, and that really helped me a lot. And I was able to pass on some of my optimism to some of the other guys aboard the boat. And I also annoyed people with my optimism. They said, "Be realistic." And as I said before, I felt being overly optimistic was the best thing for me.
Well, I think we're all really blessed by your optimism. And I think it's one of the things that probably has helped make this film so successful because everyone is in confinement right now. It's a dark time in certain ways. And this film reminds us to be creative. It reminds us, of so many of the joys that we have. And Lynn, this kind of brings us back because you're a filmmaker who's partly known as a political filmmaker. You've looked at protest movements, you've explored race, history of Los Angeles, and now you bring us relief from some of those political issues and help us think about creativity and aging. So how does this film reflect your values and what you feel the world needs right now?
Well, I think you really said it, that we need a sense of, optimism. But I also think that, for me, one of the really important parts of this was my dad's story of aging.
Right.
And I, felt like, for me, one thing that really struck me was that after my mother died, 7 years ago, my dad walked himself back into health and to optimism. And I really saw how he kind of took control of his life, and instead of, staying, holding on to the grief, he held onto it, but he was able to use exercise and creativity and thinking to bring himself back, and really have like, a really new life, as well. And so I think the film, shows a lot, and it's a good example of aging. And because it has to do with toys, it's a really great place to have a conversation between younger people and older people. And I think in all the films that I've made, I really hope for a point of conversation.
Right.
And I feel that this little film really has the potential to be that as well.
Well, so it's very interesting because the film is being so successful. It's almost going viral online, right? Like it's gonna get to 1 million views very soon. So both Daniel also and Lynn, like, why do you think it's working so well? Why do you think it's resonating for so many generations? I mean, partly you've answered the question, but yeah, but tell us, like, are you analyzing why is it like so amazing right now? It's just,
Yeah, and are you getting feedback from viewers?
yeah,
Are
yeah.
people saying
What
what
are you?
they see in the
Yeah.
Well, I'll answer. One of the things I really do think we are in a desperate, time, a very challenging time, and I think it offers hope. I mean, I'm reading comments from people on YouTube. So we have like 1,800 comments on YouTube, and none of these are people we know. So they're all random comments, and they're about, what it means to be, that Eddie has shown us how to age, or another guy who said, I woke up this morning in despair and I didn't think life was worth living anymore. And then I saw this film.
Wow.
Now, this is somebody we don't know. And then there's also all the people who talk about the toys of their childhood and the memories of certain toys and how they, it's not just that they played with them, but it reminds them of their parents, or it reminds them of another time in their life. And I think the film is really hitting on so many levels at the same time. And I think that's why it's being shared so much, and really, as we said, it's really going viral. And we certainly didn't expect it. We knew it would be successful, but we feel it's really hitting something inside people now and all over the world. I mean, we're getting comments, worldwide. So
yeah, there's also a lot of legacy in the history of these toys. I mean, in the sense that I got an email from an artist friend of mine, a 50-year-long friend, and she grew up in New York, and she emails me and says, I had the chicken that laid the eggs when I was a kid, and oh, how about that, And I also think that since we are locked in and we're isolated and we're in our own little macro worlds and doing our stuff, and we're looking at Eddie and his contained world of ideas and his workshop and moving from one space in the house to the next and making progress on a daily. And I think that feeds directly into the current experience that we're living. Even though we'd like to get out of that macro world sooner rather than later.
We're all crossing our fingers.
Yeah, really.
We have another question from the audience. This is from someone also that you know, from Cello Alvarez Steele. Asking all of you, but asking Eddie, capitalizing on the momentum of the film, are you planning to publish your collection of 100-word short stories? And Cello says she looks forward to reading them. And I think we all do. And we're excited about this other creative avenue that you have. So tell us what's happening with those stories.
Me?
Yeah. Eddie,
Actually, Lynn's taken over on the stories too.
how great.
She's editing them, assembling them, and she's going to take care of. She is going to publish them. So hopefully they'll come out one day. They are fun. 100-word stories is a worldwide hobby. It's nothing I started. There was a contest in a neighborhood newspaper, 100-word stories about 10 years ago, and that's how I got into it. And then I joined it, and I didn't win the contest, but I've been writing them ever since. I've read other short stories as well, but 100-word stories are kind of a challenge, and they're a lot of fun. And as I say, it's worldwide.
Right.
We have another question.
Yeah.
Oh, Lynn, were you going to add about the stories?
Oh, I was just going to say he has a wonderful collection. We have about 170, 180 right now that we have to, cull down to. We're going to do a book of 100-word stories, but they're about his life. They're about the Navy. Some are about toys, and some of them are, about being a senior and, in the retirement community, and about aging and about ideas. And then some are just fiction, and they're all clever, and they're all like, they have this wonderful, discipline of having a story with a plot and an ending all in 100 words.
We love what we see in the film, and I think everyone truly is eager for that book to be published.
Yeah. Well, right now, actually, you can get a sampling of them on our website, eddysworld.net. I think there's 10 of them that we have, and you can have a little taste of them.
eddysworld.net. Okay, we'll check that out.
So one thing about the film is that, as you said, it starts out being a film about toys and invention and creativity, and it becomes a film about aging. And Eddie, my own father lived to the age of 90, but the last 8 years of his life, both for health reasons and because of loss, he didn't get to experience that fully, And so I think when so many of us watch this film, we all say we want to be in our 90s and live the way you're living. And so I think we're kind of interested in your secret, but also in your reflections, which we start to get in the film, because you're looking at the retirement community and you're seeing many people age. So Eddie, we welcome your reflections on your secret and on that project.
Well, to start off, I'm lucky. That's number one. I have a sister who's 2 years younger than I am. She's in a retirement area in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My older brother lived to 88, which was, very good. But he didn't have the same loose personality that my sister and I have. We don't take little things seriously, and we try to keep serious things at a lower level as well. But I think being creative helps you, though, really. And being creative doesn't mean you have to invent or do a documentary. If you knit a cap from the beginning to the end, that's creative, and it gives you a tremendous sense of satisfaction that you've seen something grow from nothing to something. And I think that has a positive action on your brain, and your brain controls your body. And I think that helps, because I'm not a health nut. In fact, I'm anything but, although I always have been active to some extent, yeah. But I think that's the important thing.
You know, all of that comes through in the film and in the story. You know, Lynn, I think one thing that I really experienced in the film, which is maybe another sort of subtext kind of reason that it might be striking a chord right now, is that this is actually an amazingly American story. This is a story that is a story of immigration, the Depression, the war, and a certain version of, you know, a self-starting American dream kind of narrative. And so I'm wondering, when you were in the edit process and thinking about archetypes, are those things that you were thinking about and things that you see in this story?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I really think the arc of the story really does start with my dad being the child of immigrants, you know, growing up poor in Chicago, having to, you know, make his own way, and but sustained and motivated by creativity, you know, and ideas, even as, you know, a young child. There's a wonderful story, you know, that, you know, didn't make it in the film, unfortunately, but about him, you know, his father had given him a radio that had broken, a radio he had bought in one of the early days of radio. And it didn't work, and he gave it to my dad in frustration. And my dad took it apart to see how it worked, you know, and he was, you know, 5 years old then. So that kind of, that sense of curiosity, you know, and innovation. And I think that the theme that, you know, we heard constantly as we, you know, interviewed my father, and you know, was that I wanted to be an independent inventor, you know. And so the American dream, yes, here's the child of immigrants who volunteers for submarine service because his parents were welcome in this country and he wanted to give back. And yet what he wants to do is be independent and fulfill his own dreams. And I think that that's a very inspiring story, and that does set the foundation, you know, for who he is, who he became, and kind of how he's led his life.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, all of that really resonated as I was watching the film, and especially a second time watching it.
So here's the question that everyone wants to ask Eddie, right? So everyone knows the, I don't know what it's called in Spanish, right? I'm sure it had a name, right? But the yakety yak teeth. But I was trying to find the name of it, and I couldn't find it. But I'm sure it does have a name. So this is a toy that everyone in the world knows. Obviously, I remember it, right? And this was your first toy as well, right? So did you ever expect it to be so popular 70 years later? Like, it still works, you know?
Absolutely not. No, I didn't make much money on it. I made $900 on it, really.
Really?
We sold it outright, but I was able to buy an overcoat. And Chicago gets cold, you know, during the winter time. So it was a wonderful experience.
That's so great.
Are there
But
any?
can I just follow that, Dad? Why did you think it was so successful? Why did it really catch on?
I have no idea. when I saw this ad in the paper for a tooth garage, I thought that was very funny. I was very young. I was very young. So I thought false teeth, people with false teeth, I thought that was funny. Uh, so it was a weird kind of sense of humor at that time. And so
Right.
that sparked finding something involving teeth.
So I would add that I think one of the other reasons is that, my dad's told us, but certainly we've also seen through our research that many of the early talk shows in
Right.
the 50s and 60s featured it.
Yes.
And, we found for the film, we found Johnny Carson. We've seen, there's a couple of the other, TV shows where it was
Marx
with
Brothers.
Marx Brothers. And we knew it was like all over the airwaves in those early years. And I think that helped really,
Oh,
propel it
sure.
towards this, being a pop culture icon.
It was very exciting to pass by a store, a drugstore, look at a window and see the teeth. So my my wife Anita and I got a big kick out of it. It was great.
Were there any other just big surprises for you, inventions where you thought, oh, th- this is odd, but I'll try it, and then it became a global hit?
Yes, there were several of them. Uh, the most important one, the biggest one, really was the bubble gun. At that time, there were no motorized uh, toys to make bubbles at a low cost. And when I showed it to, well, I showed it to all the manufacturers that I knew, and every one of them turned it down because they said it's great, but who's going to pay $3 or $4 when they can buy a bottle of bubble fluid for 39 cents? And there's a wand in it, and you blow bubbles. And they just couldn't accept the fact that someone would pay that kind of money. And then in walked a wonderful guy, John Osher, Cap Toys, started a new company. And I did place his second item, which was successful. It was a basketball game that hung on your door. And I showed this to him, and he came with his girlfriend, Bonnie. And he said, Eddie, why would anyone pay $3 or $4 for a motorized bubble maker? He said the same thing. And she said, John, you're going to make this item. And he says, no, I'm not. And they argued for a half an hour. And he finally gave in. They weren't married yet. And they gave in. And it turned out to be an immediate success. He couldn't believe it. At the toy show, he told me he ordered more and more molds so they can make more of the items. And there's at least dozens of companies now making all kinds of wonderful motorized bubble items.
As usual, women were right. That was good.
So she is really responsible
Well,
Good.
good luck,
for the
Greg.
whole thing happening.
Well, we're coming to an end. It was really wonderful to chat with all of you, Eddie, Daniel, Lynn. We should probably wrap up and wish you much success. It is really beautiful to see father and daughter embarking on this journey with the film, not just the making of the film, but everything now to bring the film to other people in the world, kind of like the toys, right?
And we should remind everyone the website is eddysworld.net for the film. And the film is also up for a number of awards right now this season. So you will spread the word to all of your friends, spread your word to people in the film community. And this is a film we really are thrilled to support and hope others will support. Lynn, did you want to say any closing word before we wrap?
I just think I would like to again reiterate what you were saying about how wonderful of an experience this has been to really be able to share this experience of the film with my father, and it's kind of a celebration of your life that you rarely get. And so I'm really excited that the timing has been such that it's really had the kind of resonance this season, and we're very excited about it. I'm very excited it's on New Yorker, and it's and I do want to also thank Daniel and Janet Gargi, who also produced the film, and of course Vince for setting this up. And anyway, thank you, and we hope you'll be able to follow the journey. And if you have any questions, you can ask them on our website as well.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all
Thanks
so
for
much.
hosting.
Yeah.
Really
Thank you.
enjoyed it.
And
We'll see you
thank you, Robert and Almudena, to see you again. It's so
wonderful
wonderful.
to see you. It's great to see you.
one of the great wonders of Zoom.
Yes.
Yes, right.
Well,
Bye.
thank you everyone for connecting from everyone from everywhere in the world, and we'll keep posted and connected somehow via all these Zoom and etc. So thank you everyone.
And congrats
Thank
again.
you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Eddie. Bye.